Hi, today we're working on our EPP project and it's going to get a little bit more exciting today because we've moved into a making little pieces only, that is folding over our fabric to make our EPP shapes. We're moving now into the actual constructing of our quilt top. So join us right after this and I'll show you where I am. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Well, hi and welcome back. Today we're working on the EPP project and it's going to get a little more exciting. I think I've mentioned on this channel before that I love hand sewing. I love applique, I like EPP, I like putting the binding on quilts, and I like hand quilting. So it's exciting to me when we can move from the constructing the shapes part into putting the piece together. Now for this particular project, it is going to be kind of a long project because EPP is not fast. You've got to make all the shapes and then you've got to sew them together. And the way I do it, it's all by hand. But we made a transition over the weekend to move it into that part of the project. Now I haven't made all the shapes I need, but I bought a package of 450 paper pieces, and let me grab my bag here. I've probably used more than half of them. There is a good little stack in here. But as you can see, I have all of these. Let me grab my scissors because they'll fall out in this box, plus some other shapes and then some others over here that I just finished working on. So let's get started and I'll show you what I have so far. Now I think from the beginning I was pretty clear in describing it to you and in my own mind that I wanted the center of our project to be our feature fabric, and that's this white fabric with the green leaves and the little dots on it in pink and kind of a tealish blue. So I sat down last night and I sat all of these little pieces out in this fabric and kind of looked at them. And while I wanted it to be that feature fabric in the middle, I also wanted a lot of the design in it. So I picked out 8 pieces that had a lot of the leaves. It had representation of the pink dots and the teal green dots, and I started putting them together. So this is what I've come up with, is this starburst of the 8 pieces in the feature fabric. And you can see that I've tried to incorporate a lot of the dark green, the pink dots, and I think it's a striking representation of that fabric. Now, when you're talking about EPP, you want to make sure that you stitch those pieces together pretty tightly. And you also want to make sure that you have as little of the stitches showing on the front as possible. Some people do like their stitches to show up a little bit. I prefer that they don't. So what I've done is I've started here, and I did take quite a bit of care making sure that my ends matched up and my centers matched up. I had one little piece that wanted to go askew on me, so I kind of tightened that up and pulled them into place. And then I ended up putting together, I think 5 of these, and then added a section with 3 more together so I could really control how that center area was coming together, because this is going to be a place where you're going, and it's probably the only place in the whole quilt where we're going to have 8 pieces coming together into a focal point that you're going to see. So I took great care in making sure that I got those as close as possible to lining up perfectly. It is a little bit off, but you can't see it, I know. So only if you're up here at this distance are you really going to be able to see it. I also made sure that where all those pieces come together, that there was no gap, there was no hole there, because that is something that commonly happens with EPP where you're joining pieces, that you don't stitch quite far enough and you end up with that little tiny gap in that area. Okay, so we've got this together. Let me check my placement here. And then what I'm going to do from this point is I want to encircle this star with white. And I want it white so that that star really pops there in the middle. And I'm going to put these in place. Now I did all 8 of these and then 2 of the white ones last night, probably in an hour and a half or so. It's kind of late in the evening. And I was just seeing how that looked. Whoops, they don't move together very well. And you get 2 in there, and then you get the next 2 don't want to go in there. We're just going to put them in here roughly. I think you'll get the idea about the design, and then when we come back next time, you'll see all these together. I think, anyway. Okay, so we're going to circle that 8 piece in the middle with a ring of white. We're going to refer to these as rings. So this is ring 1 is the center, ring 2 is a white. And then after that, then we're going to start with some of the color. And because this is pretty small, we're probably going to keep that color to a minimum. So we might do something like this. Remember, we want a pattern here, but we don't want to be exclusively a pattern. We want it to look a little more random. And one of the other things I need to work on is some more of this fabric here, because I have the least amount in that one. Okay, we're just about there. So now, whoops, we have 2. So if we get to this point, we would be completing rings 1 and 2 and starting on 3. And we'll have 4 of the pinks and 4 of the greens. And then at that point, we may go back to adding, at least here, another ring of the white. Because remember, we're going to keep this light and not as many color influences in the middle, and then as we go out, we'll have larger color splashes, and we'll have some designs in those. But that's what I'm thinking that we're going to be looking at as far as design on this. And then also after we get to this, we may go back in fact, I think we will, and start adding some more of this fabric, the feature fabric. So those would probably be out at the tips of these accent pieces. This is going to be like a starburst color. And the title or the name of this particular project is going to be Springburst. It's a burst design in that it's all these triangles coming out, and it's very springy. So this is Springburst. And we're going to continue on with this so that next time you see it, it will be a little more, it will definitely be these 3 rings and maybe just a little bit more. So let's talk about some of the issues that I have run into with this that I wanted to give a little bit of time. First of all, the 45-degree triangle, and let me get just a regular paper piece out of the bag. I decided it was time to put some of these together because, like I said, I've used over half of these, and I need to start getting them together so that I can pull some of these papers out and begin to reuse them. I've probably got another, I would say 150 in here would be my guess. So we are getting kind of close, and I don't want to have to buy more. I would prefer to try to be able to do it just with the 450. Okay, so the 45-degree 8-pointed star triangle. A couple of challenges that I've noticed with that. First of all, these points on the edges are very sharp, and what that means is when you're covering this fabric, these points, or these what do we call them, corners maybe, these are very easy to deal with. It kind of reminds me of dealing with a hexagon. It's a little bit of a turn, but it's not too much, and it's very easy just to tuck that fabric there, roll the other one over, and go. The end points, the pointy ones, they're a little bit more challenging, and I would say they're even more challenging than a 60-degree triangle, a 60-degree diamond. I keep thinking of that because it is that shape, because it is more pointy. So that means that your tail here is much bigger and longer than it is on a 60-degree, I did it again, a 60-degree diamond. So that's why when we sit these down and we try to look at what kind of design we're thinking about, it's a little more difficult to push them together because you've got this big tail. Now there's another thing that I ran across and I want to briefly discuss with you. So give me just a second. I want to kind of rearrange this and I'll be right back. Okay, the other challenge with this particular shape, and this is the 45-degree angle here. It's very pointy and it has a bigger tail. And what happens when you're trying to put multiple of these together, you have to match up this corner here. And then this corner, you've got one tail sitting over the other piece. So when you're sewing it, if you're sewing a whip stitch, you would have it like this, and you would sew to where you felt like the paper ran out. And sometimes that's a little hard to tell because this one feels like it's much longer than this one. They're very pointy and they're very easy to bend over. So sometimes you might think the paper stopped, and the paper stopped because it's so pointy it flexes a good bit. So just be careful that you're getting the full length of your stitches, either here in a whip stitch or if you stitch flat back. Okay, then the other thing is where you have multiples of these coming together, and like I said, in the middle is going to be the only place we have 8 of them coming together. But these, let's do it this way. When you line these up, they all should sit right over the other. And you have to be super careful about, like I said, getting stitches all the way to the end. And the other thing is, once you get all of the pieces in place, those little tails need to spin around. So we got the tails spun around last night, and they were still very thick because there's 8 pieces, but in those corners there's what, 4 layers of fabric? I think that's right. No, there's 2 layers of fabric on this side of the paper for each of those pieces. So when they're all coming together, and even if you're trying to bend them down on top of each other, it still gets kind of thick. So what I did was I did 2 things. First of all, I made sure I didn't have a hole in the middle, because this is going to be the focus of the whole thing right there in the middle. So I made sure, and I even took an extra stitch to make sure it was pull tight. But then I also took this little place where we have fanned out all those tails, and I took some white thread, which is what I'm using to sew it together, and stitched those tails down in place. And I sewed only through this part of the fabric here and the tails. And I just stitched around, and then I stitched around again. So I've got like little concentric circles here to hold those in place. Then that way I'm not relying on pressing to do it. And as I handle this, because this is going to be the part of this quilt top that gets handled the most, and it'll also be the first portion that gets the papers taken out. I don't have to worry about those twisting and turning a month from now or 2 months from now, however long it takes to do this, because they're stitched down. And I would encourage you to do that as well in this particular design, especially because of where that's positioned. Now, you'll also notice that some of these, this is a good example right here, this area right here kind of lifts up like this. That's an exaggeration, but it does have a little bit of lift. Now when you take those papers out, and you put all of the pieces around it, all of those little things that you can see now, you're not going to be able to see, because remember that paper is in there stretching that fabric around it, and you take that paper out, the fabric can kind of relax as much as it can to pull against those stitches. So your stitches are going to kind of disappear, and any little misshapen things like this, the way this is folding up like this, will disappear as well. Now while that's coming up, this one's going down, this one's coming up, this one's coming up. So it's just a matter of getting it all sewn together and then taking that out. So there's a couple of hints about EPP in general and how they go together, little things that might help you with the spinning of those tails. Now, before we end today, I wanted to share something else that kind of sort of goes along with this, but maybe not really. And I don't want to use my good scissors. I had heard that one of the thread manufacturers was sending out samples for a new quilting thread, or an improved quilting thread. So I figured out how to request one, and I did. So I received this just this week. That's why I wanted to go ahead and get it on the video. And this is YLI Threads. It's a hand quilting sample. Now, it's not marked what color it is. It looks like it's kind of a wheat color. And let's do this. I think that's pretty close. Okay, so I've got 2 Americana. Americana is usually the brand that I prefer. It's very inexpensive. It usually runs about 99 cents a spool, and there's 150 yards on here. And I would say this color is somewhere between their linen and their baguette. It's kind of a tan. It kind of reminds me of a file folder. And a little information there. And it asks you to try out the thread and then do a short survey. So I am very thankful that they elected to include me in this. Let's see if I can get it opened. There we go. It's been plastic wrapped. I'll tell you, it's kind of a pain to open, but I really like that because I tell you, sometimes I find this Americana quilting thread in the bin at Joann's, and it has come loose and it's just going everywhere. This new one, the sample, is spun much neater than the Americana. And let me grab one that's been opened. Just a quick first impression. And what I'll probably do is set up a little sample and do some stitching in the next few days and then get back with you. I don't know how much is on the spool. And this is the beige they provided me with, and the little piece I have here is a white from the Americana. So it's easy to tell. They look like they're about the same size or weight. Yeah, very, very close. And the YLI thread feels a little smoother. Now I know that the Americana is what they call glazed cotton, and it would seem to me like that the YLI was as well. It's a little smoother. Whatever they've put on it, if I had to guess, I would think it would probably glide through the fabric a little bit better. So anyway, that's going to be something that I'm going to be working on in the next couple of weeks to give it a shot and see how it does. Now, actually, I'm probably going to test it out. I can't figure out how to get that sewn back on. I'll probably be testing it out in the next few days, and it will be at least a week or two before I get a video back up. But I will be working on that to give some feedback about the fabric, about the thread, in addition to the company, but also to you as well, so that you will know how it compares with what I'm using now. I think that's all for today. I'm going to be working on my EPP project in the evenings to get those rows put on. And we've got a video coming out on Friday with our barn star. So take a look at that if you're interested in that project. In the meantime, have a great week sewing. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe if you have not already, and share us with a friend. We will see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Bye-bye.